The restaurant was alive with soft jazz, the clinking of glasses, and the low hum of conversations. Candlelight flickered on polished tables, creating an air of elegance that made the place one of the city's most sought-after dining spots. Among the diners that evening sat Eleanor Hayes, a CEO known not just for her sharp business mind but also for her relentless schedule and intimidating presence. Few people ever saw her outside boardrooms or headlines. Tonight, however, she was here, hoping for a quiet meal after a long week. She didn't know her life was about to take an unexpected turn. At a corner table, near the back, sat Daniel Carter, a single dad in his late 30s. He wasn't dressed in an expensive suit, just a clean white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, his little girl's drawing peeking out of his pocket like a bookmark he forgot to put away. Daniel had worked odd jobs since his wife passed away, raising his daughter, Lily, alone. He was there only because an old friend had invited him for a small catch-up dinner. But when his friend canceled last minute, Daniel decided to stay. Something about the warm light and smell of roasted garlic made him feel he could use a few quiet minutes to himself. He was stirring his soup when it happened. The restaurant door burst open, and 3 men stormed in. They weren't ordinary troublemakers, each one had the hard, restless energy of people who had nothing left to lose. Their eyes swept the room, and when they spotted Eleanor Hayes, it was as if they had found exactly who they were looking for. "Ms. Hayes," one of them barked, loud enough for every diner to hear. Chairs scraped back as people turned, gasps rising in the air. The men moved quickly, cornering her table. "Get up," another ordered, gripping her arm. The waitstaff froze, fear written across their faces. Someone whispered about calling the police, but the men looked dangerous enough that no one dared move too openly. Eleanor tried to keep her composure. "Whatever you want, we can talk." But her words were cut off when one of them slammed his fist onto the table, knocking over a glass. Wine splashed across the white linen like blood on snow. Daniel watched, his heart pounding. He had promised himself, after years of struggle, that he would keep his head down, stay out of trouble. Lily depended on him, and he couldn't afford risks. Yet as he looked at Eleanor's frightened face and the terrified diners shrinking into their seats, something inside him stirred. He pushed his chair back slowly. "Hey," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "That's enough." The men turned toward him, startled. One sneered. "Sit down, hero. This has nothing to do with you." Daniel's jaw tightened. Few people knew the truth about him. Years ago, before life had stripped him down to long shifts and parenting struggles, Daniel had trained in martial arts. Not for glory, but for discipline, for balance. He hadn't used those skills in years, not since Lily was born, and survival meant bills, not belts. But old instincts don't disappear. They wait. When one of the attackers shoved Eleanor roughly, Daniel stepped forward. "I said stop." The man closest to him swung first, a clumsy punch fueled more by rage than technique. Daniel sidestepped effortlessly, his movement almost graceful, and with one swift motion, he twisted the attacker's arm behind his back and sent him sprawling onto a nearby chair. Gasps rippled through the room. The second man lunged with a bottle, but Daniel ducked low, sweeping his leg with precise control. The man crashed to the ground, groaning. Now only one stood, his face flushed with anger. He reached for Eleanor, maybe hoping to use her as a shield. But Daniel's eyes sharpened, calm, focused. He moved before anyone could blink, disarming the man with practiced ease and pinning him against the table. The restaurant was silent except for heavy breathing and the faint music still playing in the background, as if mocking the chaos. For a moment, no one moved. Then applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger, until the entire restaurant was clapping. Diners who had shrunk in fear moments ago now stood, cheering. Eleanor, still shaken, looked at Daniel with wide eyes. "You saved me." Daniel released the last man, who slumped to the floor, defeated. "I just did what anyone should," he said quietly. But Eleanor knew better. Not everyone could have done what he just did. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The attackers were dragged out, leaving behind only overturned chairs and spilled wine. Slowly, the restaurant returned to a fragile calm. Eleanor sat back down, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her glass of water. Across the room, Daniel straightened his shirt, ready to slip away before attention turned too much toward him. He didn't like the spotlight. "Wait," Eleanor called, her voice steadier now. Daniel paused. "Who are you?" she asked. For a second, he considered brushing it off. But something about the way she asked, genuine, curious, almost vulnerable, made him answer honestly. "Just a dad trying to do right by his little girl." Eleanor's eyes softened. She had spent decades building empires, managing fortunes, winning negotiations. But in that moment, what touched her most wasn't the skill he had shown, but the humility in his voice. "Join me," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. Daniel hesitated, then walked over. The restaurant buzzed with whispers about the dramatic scene, but at their table, the world seemed quieter. "You know," Eleanor began, "people usually want something from me. Money, favors, connections. You didn't. You put yourself at risk for someone you didn't even know." "Why?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Because Lily, my daughter, she deserves to grow up in a world where people step up for each other. If I don't show her that, then what kind of example am I?" Eleanor blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of his answer. It wasn't about power or pride. It was about love, pure and unshakable. Something stirred inside her. For years, Eleanor had battled sleepless nights, the weight of responsibilities pressing on her chest. Success had given her everything but peace. Yet here was a man with little to his name, who seemed to carry a kind of quiet strength she had never known. They spoke for a while longer. About Lily's drawings, about the exhaustion of single parenting, about the unexpected paths life takes. For the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt seen, not as a CEO, not as a headline, but as a person. When the night ended, Daniel stood to leave. "Take care," he said simply. Eleanor nodded, her gaze lingering. "You too, Daniel Carter." As he walked out into the cool night air, his daughter's picture still tucked safely in his pocket, Eleanor sat back and breathed deeply. The chaos had passed, but something else had begun. A spark, fragile yet undeniable. And though neither of them knew it yet, that night would be remembered not for the attack, but for the moment a single dad's hidden skill changed everything.